Good afternoon. Welcome to the court's first virtual swearing-in ceremony in 2023. Please keep your audio muted throughout the ceremony. If you wish to follow the speaker, you may want to set your view to speaker view. Mr. Julio Castillo, Clerk of the Court of Appeals, will offer opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will be administering the oath this afternoon. When I administer the oath, I will be using the word swear. If any of you object to using the word swear, you may substitute the word affirm in its place. Thank you and welcome. And I turn the mic over to Mr. Dade.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. The courtroom clerk will now open the courtroom.
All persons having business before the Honorable Associate Judge, now presiding over the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, draw near and give your attention. God save the United States in this honorable court. This honorable court is now in session. Please come to order.
Mr. Dickerson, the Honorable Judge Ruiz will offer introductory remarks.
Hold on. Thank you for unmuting me. I was trying to do that on my own, but I was not being permitted to do that. I am Vanessa Ruiz, Senior Judge of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. And on behalf of all of my colleagues on the court, I am pleased to welcome you, the prospective new members of the bar, as well as your friends and families, to our first virtual bar admission ceremony of 2023. Generally, when we have a court session to hear cases on appeal, it is a very serious and sobering affair. So it is a true pleasure to preside over a joyful occasion like this swearing-in ceremony. And I can happily inform you that by the time we finish here today, you will all be prevailing parties. The Court of Appeals is a relatively new court. Speaking of courts generally nationwide, it was created by Congress in 1970 to review appeals from the District of Columbia Trial Court, the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, as well as appeals from DC administrative agencies. The court created the DC Bar, and it is our duty to exercise and exercise oversight over the bar and its members, including to rule on motions for admissions of new members. Today, that motion will be made on your behalf by Ms. Ilea Welch, staff attorney for the Committee on Admissions. Ms. Welch?
Thank you, Judge Ruiz. On behalf of the Committee on Admissions of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, I, Ilea Welch, staff attorney for the District of Columbia Court of Appeals Committee on Admissions, moves the admission to the bar of this court the applicants whose names appear on the attached list and who have satisfied the requirements for admission to the bar of this court. On behalf of the Committee on Admissions, I certify to the court that these applicants possess the necessary qualifications for admission to the bar. Thank you, Judge Ruiz.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. While it may appear that I am giving this motion only cursory review, having just all of you just heard Ms. Welch's motion, I received the motion before today's ceremony, and I know that the Committee on Admissions has devoted a great deal of time and scrutiny to your applications and would not have put you on this list if anything were out of order. So I am pleased on behalf of the court to grant the motion to admit today's candidates as members of the DC Bar. And I will now recognize Mr. Castillo, the clerk of our court, to administer the oath. Mr. Castillo, if you would do that, please.
Thank you, Judge Ruiz. If you'd be kind enough to stand and raise your right hand, as I administer the oath. And please repeat after me. Raise your right hand. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that as a member of the bar of this court, I will demean myself uprightly and according to law, and that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America. You may sit now. Congratulations, and I turn the mic over now to Mr. Dade.
Mr. Castillo, and congratulations to you all. The Honorable Judge Ruiz will give judicial remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo and Mr. Dade. And again, I want to congratulate all of you, our newest members of the bar. It is a tradition at these swearing-in ceremonies for the presiding judge, me today, to provide remarks. And I will do that now, if you will allow me some time. Now that you have been sworn in on behalf of the DC Court of Appeals, I want to welcome you and extend congratulations again to all of you, as well as to your family members and friends who have joined in virtually. You are all our new members of the bar, our fellow members of the bar, because judges also are members of the DC bar. Were we holding this admission ceremony in person, I would also be welcoming you to the historic courthouse of the District of Columbia, which is the home of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. It is one of the oldest public buildings in the District of Columbia, originally commissioned as Washington City Hall in 1820. From that date to the present day, this building has played many roles as a federal and district courthouse, as a hospital. It held prisoners during the Civil War. It has housed several notable residents, among them Frederick Douglass, Theodore Roosevelt. It has been the site of several significant trials. In 1849, there was a prosecution of Daniel Drayton, an abolitionist who orchestrated the largest recorded escape attempt by enslaved people aboard the schooner, the Pearl. In 1867, John Surratt was tried for conspiracy to assassinate President Abraham Lincoln, whose statue was erected outside the courthouse in 1868, and it still stands today, facing Indiana Avenue. In 1925, it was the site of a trial involving the Teapot Dome scandal, one of the biggest bribery scandals in US history. After this virtual tour I have just given you of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals courthouse, I invite you to come in person at some other time and see it firsthand. For now, we will make do with this virtual ceremony. And before I continue, I want to make sure that I have granted the motion of Ms. Welch to admit you to the DC bar so that that is recorded in the court records. I welcome you to the bar. After this, I believe, is the first admission for most of you after years of studying hard in law school and for the bar exam last summer, the application process to the Committee on Admissions, and probably also after having accumulated a substantial debt for education loans. Taking the oath and listening to its words, not only with your head, but also really internalizing it in your heart, is a good reminder of what it means to be admitted to the practice of law. Let me tell you about the bar of which you are now a part. Notwithstanding its small geographical size, the District of Columbia has one of the largest bars in absolute numbers in the country, over 100,000. It is certainly the largest on a per capita basis. It is a diverse bar in terms of its membership and the areas of practice its members engage. This court, with the assistance of several committees and disciplinary counsel, has the authority and the responsibility to pass on the admission and the professional conduct of all lawyers in the District of Columbia. We admit lawyers who qualify, such as this distinguished group today. We suspend and disbar lawyers who do not live up to the ethical standards of the rules of professional responsibility. That's always a sad, although necessary measure to protect the public and clients. From this vantage point, I can tell you that the practice of law in this city is probably one of the most varied and exciting in the country. Some of you in this room will practice in law firms, small law firms to large international law firms, or in government, whether local or federal, or in trade associations or consulting firms, perhaps with a public interest group or in private business. Some of you will be litigators, others transactional attorneys, others will engage in analysis and policy work. Some of you will find your practice and continue with it for a long time, but others among you, because of developing interests or because of changes in the legal market, will shift your legal practice perhaps a few times. I hope that all of you will take advantage of the size and the diversity of our bar and the variety of opportunities in the District of Columbia for legal work and for service to our community. You come to practice in the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, at a time that questions government and its institutions. That includes the courts and the judicial system. The careful and fair application of law by courts and the integrity of the lawyers who practice before them are critical. Remember the oath that you took today and the responsibility it imposes on each one of you as a member of our bar to help instill public confidence in the judicial system by your actions in each case that you handle, in every paper you file, and every court appearance that you make, and whenever you give advice to a client. Remember also that you are being admitted to practice in the District of Columbia, which is a vibrant community. Real people live and work here, and real people have real legal needs here, including the need for legal services, for tutoring, and for mentoring. In this connection, I want to remind you of Rule 6.1 of the Rules of Professional Responsibility, by which your conduct as a member of the DC Bar must be guided. I'm just going to quote the first sentence of the rule. A lawyer should participate in serving those persons or groups of persons who are unable to pay all or a portion of reasonable attorney's fees, or who are otherwise unable to obtain counsel. A resolution adopted by the DC Court's Judicial Conference, as well as by the Judicial Conference of the DC Circuit, specifies what this professional obligation entails. And it is that each lawyer should accept one court appointment or devote at least 50 hours of pro bono legal service each year to an indigent or disadvantaged client. Or if that is not feasible, to make a financial contribution of $750 or 1% of earned income, whichever is less, to organizations that provide pro bono services. I suggest you do both. The need is truly great. Many persons with legal needs, pressing legal needs, go without any legal representation. A shockingly high percentage, over 90%, have no choice but to represent themselves in landlord-tenant court. This in a community which, as I mentioned earlier, has the highest number of lawyers on a per capita basis in the country. Many of the needs are in areas within your practice, and they will be familiar. But you could decide to take on a new area. There are programs that will teach you what you need to know, so your pro bono work will be up to par with your build work, as it should be. Those of you who have legal skills, language skills, are sorely needed. I have been addressing new members of the bar for almost 30 years, and I invariably talk about pro bono service because the need is so great. I would like to mention several items from the report of the DC Access to Justice Commission, which was created by this court to bring together judges, members of the bar, legal service providers, academics, and community representatives to tackle the lack of legal representation and other obstacles that hinder access to court and other recourse designed to protect important rights to shelter, to education, physical safety, health, and family. We live in such a thriving city of professional and high-powered individuals that we tend to forget that not all of our neighbors are participating in that life. As the report, Delivering Justice, reminds us, over 100,000 residents in the District of Columbia live in poverty and are more likely to experience civil legal problems. Poverty itself impedes their ability to address and recover from these problems. The challenges of poverty are compounded by life circumstances that create additional barriers for thousands. Over 70,000 district residents are 65 or older. Nearly 41,000 are limited English proficient. Tens of thousands live with a disability. 15% are immigrants who may be in a vulnerable status. The report finds that even though our legal service providers have doubled in the number of staff and the number of clients they serve through full representation during the 10 years since our previous report, the mounting legal needs of district residents continue to outpace the resources they have available to meet those needs. Most striking is the data we received from the DC courts and the DC Office of Administrative Hearings, showing the rates of lack of representation. They are staggeringly high. I already mentioned landlord-tenant court, but in small estate probate, 97% have no legal representation. 83 to 93% live for litigants in family matters. 88% of petitioners in domestic violence cases, no legal representation. And even more for the respondents in those cases, 95% have no lawyer. Even on appeal, where the rules that govern presentation of cases are going to be less familiar to a layperson, in some types of matters, many parties come to our court going it alone when their housing is at stake and in family and probate matters. We can see this need in the thousands of litigants who visit the court's self-help centers each year seeking help. And these are the people who make it to the court. Imagine how many others don't know their rights or just simply give up. I should tell you that the numbers I just quoted were before the COVID pandemic, and they have risen since then. The numbers in the District of Columbia are also not unique, but a reflection of what happens throughout the country. So that is the bad news, which I have laid out. But there is also good news, and you are part of it. Lawyers of the DC Bar have a long tradition of providing pro bono legal service to the economically disadvantaged. As a result, there are many programs for pro bono service available through the DC Bar, voluntary bar associations, and many law firms. They run the gamut from helping one person navigate a claim for disability compensation, to representing an abused or neglected child, to assisting an immigrant seeking asylum from persecution in another country. You might be helping a person sort through what appears to a layperson to be an incomprehensible and devastating problem. You could help resolve what are many times fairly minor knots that can nonetheless tie up a person's life. Or you could be writing an appellate brief for a person on death row. Another way is through service to the courts by volunteering to take over representation of pro se litigants in civil litigation. Cases handled represent the broad spectrum of civil litigation in the district at the trial and appellate levels, and they include cases from prisoners, workplace and domestic disputes, and administrative cases. I urge you to consider how you can help represent a person in need. You can obtain information from the DC Bar's Pro Bono Committee, which will have a representative at the course for new admittees you will soon be taking, from local legal service providers, through local bar associations, and there's a pro bono website, www.probono.net/DC. Explore these options or come up with your own. If you end up practicing in another jurisdiction, see what you can do there because they need you. But in your practice, carry on this bar's outstanding tradition of service. And when you do, you will realize that you are gaining much for yourself as well. Many of us, and I include the judges and myself, look back over our professional careers and what we have accomplished. And sometimes we ponder whether the many sacrifices were worth it. Often we find that the most satisfying work professionally and personally were the efforts in cases we handled on a pro bono basis before we took the bench. It reminds all of us that notwithstanding caricatures of lawyers and lawyer jokes, law can indeed be a noble profession that furthers values of fairness and justice that we hold dear. These are the values that motivated many of us to study law in the first place. And speaking of what is important as you go forward, have a life outside of your law practice, a rich personal life with your friends and with your family. Spend time with them. They have supported you and helped you during your law studies. They will hear you complain often enough about work, about the long hours you have to put in, about the difficulties of the job market. So have a life. Being a lawyer is a terrific and important thing, but it is not the only important thing in your life. Again, on behalf of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, I welcome you and wish you the best in your practice here. Thank you.
This honorable court is now adjourned.